Good to see you. What a beautiful smile. Hey, ladies. Oh, you're so beautiful. Well, it's good to see you all today, and welcome to today's episode of Glad You Asked. So, we've got a couple of interesting topics to chat with you all about because things are a little bit hot and crazy out in this market. And so, we want to give you guys some warnings about some things that are happening and a couple of reminders today. So I'm going to start with the announcement. In case you didn't get the email, Teresa is on vacation just for the rest of the week, and she will miss you and think fondly of you from Cancun, Mexico. Woo-hoo!
Oh,
So
wow.
just wanted to make sure that you guys know that. So if you do have any broker in charge questions, I'll be handling the broker in charge email. You can call the broker in charge hotline with big questions. And the reminder, that number is 336-864-5991. All right. Reminder number 2, the commercial training with Margaret McCann, that is coming up April the 13th from 10 to 12 in the Burlington Market Center. The invitations for that went out today. And just a reminder, we are asking for RSVPs if you plan to attend that training. So just look for that. If you did not get the invitation, make sure you send an email to April, and that's the Hillsborough front desk email account, so that she can make sure to get you updated on the list so that you could make sure you're on the list to be able to attend. Yeah, Tammy.
I did not get it. So what is her email address again?
Okay. April, will you in the chat put the email address that they should send if they did not get the invitation?
Yes, ma'am, I sure will.
All right, thank you, dear. So just look for it in the chat in a minute, Tammy, and then she can get that out to you. All right, we're really excited. I think that commercial training, I'm planning on attending myself, so I will see you all there. And then the third reminder before we get to our topics is that we have 2 policy and procedure reminders that we'll talk about, actually, so 3 and 4. The first one is policy and procedure number 2, just the agency agreement and contract policy. Make sure that you guys know all fully executed agreements must be uploaded and submitted in command within 48 hours. So a lot of, we're finding a lot of agents are actually updating their documentation or uploading it, but they're not submitting. So don't forget to hit that submit button, because until then, we can't view any of your paperwork. We can't check for making sure that you are in compliance. We can't do any of that. And if there's questions or concerns that come up, we don't have the ability to review and to address those with the person that's calling with the complaint. Okay, so you do have to actually follow through with that submission so that it's officially there for us to be able to speak to any calls, complaints, or issues that come in. Okay, so that was just a reminder again that's policy and procedure number 2. And then the other one, the reminder for today, is policy and procedure number 32. And this is about the privilege license and business entity documentation. So we're coming up on time for renewals, April annual renewals and things like that. So just a reminder, each agent must provide proof of payment for your privilege license each year to the BIC, the broker in charge email, brokerincharge832@gmail.com. And if you are a business entity or operating as one, you must provide proof of your annual firm license renewal and proof of payment of the filing the annual report to the Secretary of State. So if you're operating as an entity and you're wanting to receive compensation through your entity, then we're going to need that proof of that you filed your annual report and that you've paid that filing fee. Okay, so we have to have that before we, the firm, can pay your entity. All right, so just a reminder of those 2 policies and procedures, because we're coming up on those filing times, and making sure that you get that documentation to us. All right, so now today's topics, we've got a couple of topics. The first one is, do you bring home inspectors or other service providers with you to a showing. Okay, so we got a recent question or issue that came up with that. And so we want to ask, first of all, what are your thoughts on should you bring them? You know, I get that you're thinking outside the box and, you know, how can you best protect your buyer clients and such? So what do you guys think?
I think it's okay if you bring, like a lot of the inspectors nowadays are offering oh, I can't remember what it's called. It's like a little walkthrough they'll do with you they're offering the services to kind of do that with you, just to give you a little heads up of what could be wrong with the house.
Okay, so you think they can, and it's a nice service to provide?
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else have an opinion? Anyone say, no, definitely don't do it? Okay, so I'll tell you, there's not a cut and dry rule when it comes to having a home inspector to join you. There's no rule that says you can't, but there are a couple of rules and regulations in place that home inspectors are supposed to follow. And there's a couple of things that you all need to be aware of if you bring a home inspector on a showing. Okay, and so we're going to talk through all of those things. So the first thing is, if you do bring a home inspector on a showing, they can only come for visual inspections. Okay, when you're in a showing, there is not a contract between a buyer or a seller that gives authority for that home inspector to actually touch anything or inspect anything further than a visual walkthrough inspection. Okay, so if there's not a contract in place, who is liable if a home inspector does some sort of inspection activity and there is a problem? If they touch something and they cause damage to the property, who would be liable if the buyer and seller are not under contract? Okay, Tammy, you got it, right? Right? Because there's no contract. So until there's a contract, there's not permission granted from the seller for the buyer to be able to actually proceed with inspection of that property. So technically, you really should not bring one, but if you are, you have to be certain to instruct them carefully that it can be visual only. It's just a walkthrough as you're walking through with your clients. Okay, so this is for your protection, because we have had this happen recently. And if the home inspector does any of their typical practices, because when they're inspecting, they can touch and they can turn on and they can do all kinds of things. But you know, as real estate brokers, we are not permitted to do those things, and neither are our clients, or in this case, inspectors that might come with us to the property. You can't even change the temperature settings. Okay, so just a reminder that you nor anyone that you bring into the property have the ability or authority to do any kind of hands-on inspections during a showing. Okay, so we just want to give you that heads up. You know, we appreciate that people are trying to think outside the box and protect their clients ahead of time from things that could potentially show up in the inspection process. But keep in mind, any kind of inspection prior to a contract has to be visual only. All right, so that's just a heads up and a warning for your protection and for your client's protection. And then if the other question that came up was, what about crawl space inspections? Can your client crawl in a crawl space during a showing, or can they have a, that visual only kind of inspection happen? Again, as long as no one's touching anything, as long as it's visual only, you can enter the crawl space. Now, remember, you as real estate brokers, you're not expected to do that, but there's nothing saying that you couldn't if you decide you want to get down and dirty and crawl under there. But remember, it's for visual inspection purposes only. Okay, so visual crawling, take a picture, do not touch, do not attempt to function. So just keep those things in mind when you're thinking about how to look out for your buyer's interests, but also protect yourself from lawsuits or liability. All right. Any questions about that? No questions? All right. Topic number 2 for today. Do you handle a showing as if you are being recorded? Do you handle your showings as if you are being recorded? Okay, so what does that look like for you, Sarah? If you're showing, I saw you nod for me. What do you do or not do when you're in a showing because you have an awareness that you could be recorded?
I mean, I just generally don't touch people's belongings or do really anything other than turn lights on and off. Yeah, I mean, I just because what if they are, right?
Okay, that's a good practice, right? Make sure not to touch any personal items. Light switches and door handles are pretty much all that you're expected to touch, and just for the purpose of the showing, right? But what about your clients? What should your clients be touching in the property?
Maybe a door handle.
Okay, maybe if you didn't open it for them already, right? They really shouldn't be touching much of anything, especially if you're showing and handling the touching, especially in these COVID times also. But what your client should not be is reclining on the furniture. They are not at home, and furniture is personal property. So, I mean, there are some things that people do that would really shock or amaze you. And so we want to just bring some things up and make sure that you help your clients to understand what the conduct is and is not in a showing scenario or situation. So in addition to what should be obvious, like not reclining on the furniture, the other things that your clients should not be doing are opening any kind of drawers, any kind of opening of anything really is, those are personal items. When you're opening something, a closet is one of those kind of gray areas because there's personal belongings in closets, but at the same time, they want to see the space in the closet. So, it's something to keep in mind, and it would be better for you to do the opening than for your client when it comes to things like closets or such. Okay. There are buyers and I'm not buyers, there are sellers now that are starting to submit complaints based on what they're watching in their video recordings of how the showings are being conducted and who's allowed to do what or touch what. And so again, this market, everybody's a lot more touchy. There's a lot more money up front that's being handled, and people are responding differently. So we just want to do some reminders for your sake and for your protection of showing etiquette, if you will. And remember that you really shouldn't be taking photos of anything personal in the home as well. You are permitted, as long as the showing doesn't indicate otherwise, to take pictures or to do video in the sake or in the case of maybe another party that is not able to attend in person. But again, only of the real property, the real estate, the permanent attached type fixtures. We're not taking pictures and photos of personal property or personal items. Okay. And again, no opening of drawers. Be very careful when you're opening closets, things like that. Now, with that being said, and some of the complaints, oh, Sarah, you got a question? Sure.
I do have a question. So what about cabinets and stuff like in the kitchen, testing them for functionality, really? Is that okay?
Okay, remember, functionality type things, those are under home inspection type of umbrella, if you will. And so you really just want to be very careful about the purpose or the reason for it. So a showing is just that, it's a showing. You don't have the right to do inspections typically at the time of showing. And so that's something to really think about now, because these sellers are just really getting just to the wire. Now, in the past, you have had agents that could get away with trying to do a little something here or there for inspection purposes. Yeah, can you open the door and peek under the sink? I don't think that that's a problem, because you know that water is an issue, but make sure you're not peeking under there looking at personal property. Make sure you can speak to whatever action that you take in the property. And again, assume that you're being recorded. And so if you do peek under a sink, it should just be that. You shouldn't be moving stuff around, okay? You're overstepping your bound if you're moving items. And so it's really important to make sure that you are aware, because again, these sellers are watching you guys. They are recording you. And even though it's illegal, they are audio recording. Be aware of that. You can't really do anything about it unless you can prove that. But do be aware that there are some sellers who are breaking the law and audio recording. Okay, so you also have to watch what you say in addition to what you're doing in the property. Judy, did you have a question?
Well, I was going to say, if you're in a kitchen, you want to see, are these soft close drawers, or do they have the pull-out shelves? I mean, I think, you have to be able to look, right?
I would say that that's reasonable. And again, if those are the things that you're looking for, just being able to speak to that. If your client is looking for soft close, and if it didn't note in the listing that they have soft close, it's reasonable to open one drawer and try to shut it to see. And that your actions would support that investigation, if you will. But you just want to make sure that you're not rifling through the drawers, that you're not taking an extra long look at what's in there, those kinds of things that would make a seller suspicious about your quote unquote motives. Okay, so you have to make sure, especially on camera, that you don't appear to be trying to maliciously invade their privacy or overstep the bounds into more of a home inspection kind of a category. So I don't see anything wrong with, opening a cabinet, peeking under a sink. But again, we're not getting under there. We're not moving items around. We're not digging into the home inspection kind of a territory or category.
Right.
Okay. Ruth.
What if the property is empty? Is that different than if people still live there? So if it's totally empty and client has gone through other inspections that didn't work out for them, so they have an idea of what they're looking for in terms of piping and, so is it okay if it's vacant, where the property is vacant, there's no furniture? Is it okay for the client to open or look under the sink in the bathroom, or look under the sink in the kitchen, and go under the crawl space because they want to make sure that it's not wet under there and it has because they've gone through an inspection, the first inspection, or they didn't go properly, so they have an idea of, okay, this is what I have to look for now in order to be eligible for it.
Okay, Ruth, thank you for asking that question. And I would say when it comes to a vacant property, there's less of an opportunity for a seller to have a complaint that their privacy is being in any way compromised. So I would say that you probably would have less of a chance of a complaint from a seller. I'm not saying that you can't open the cabinets when you're in a showing that for a home that's occupied, but again, be very cautious that you're likely being recorded, and make sure that those actions support something simple like looking for a water stain or something like that. But chances of you having complaints in a vacant property are probably going to be a lot lower than a property that's occupied. All right. Any other questions about that? It's one of those gray areas where, we don't have a list of specific things you can or can't do. And really what we just want to tell you is to operate as if you are on camera, and make sure you can speak to any action that you take within someone's property. Okay. And then one other little follow-up or tail to that is, if there is an instruction in the MLS or showing time, if there's a showing instruction, you have to be aware of those showing instructions and careful to follow them. Okay. So there are sellers who, even though the masking guidelines have been reduced, if a seller specifically states, or if the agent states in the showing instructions that the seller requires masks for entry into the home, you have to make sure to convey that to your clients, and you have to operate according to those seller instructions. Okay, so you are liable for following the MLS and the showing instructions that are provided for the agents and for entrance into the property. So sellers can put additional restrictions, and you have to abide by those restrictions. Otherwise, you will be liable for violating them. Okay, so that's another issue that has come up, specifically masking questions or concerns when they were specifically stated still in the listing and the showing instructions and then not followed. That will cause a problem for you and your clients not following specifically stated instructions. Okay, so make sure you're paying attention. I know it's busy. I know you're showing hundreds of thousands of properties right now. Take a moment to read the showing instructions of the property before you enter, and make sure that you're following that seller's wishes, because again, they are recording you. They want to make sure that you're following it, and they are following up. They're bringing their complaints to the firms, to the BICs, to agents. And so we're just, again, trying to protect you by making you aware of the things that are happening and trending right now. All right. Any other questions about those topics?
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
So going back to the inspection
Mhm.
before a house goes under contract. So from the seller standpoint, if a buyer's agent or a buyer wants to send in a home inspector for regular home inspection prior to going under contract. I had this happen to me once
Mhm.
where a buyer who I'd met at an open house showed a whole lot of interest in the home. Next thing I know, I'm getting an appointment request by a home inspector directly. And when I asked about it, like, who asked you to set this up? I traced it back to this person. And I didn't think it served the seller well to have her home inspected before it had even gone under contract with that buyer.
Mhm.
So we didn't allow it. I'm wondering what yours or anybody else's thoughts are from a listing standpoint about the advisability of allowing an inspection or not before a property goes under contract.
Oh, that's a really great question. Thank you, Judy. So when it comes to allowing it or not, again, ultimately, that is up to the seller. They might be looking to us for guidance, but they are the ones that have the ultimate responsibility for providing permission or not. And so there's some pros and cons to that. From the listing side, they are going to have to potentially address whatever may come up in a home inspection. So to have it inspected, pre-inspected, maybe that seller could ask for a copy of the report in lieu of having a contract for that, and they could have some idea of what might be happening. So there could be some benefit to the seller there. It's ultimately a probably a better protection for the buyer in that particular case, so that they could know ahead of time what they might be dealing with and how they may want to structure their offer. And so from that standpoint, it would not be in the seller's best interest if things are wrong or found, because that buyer would take those things into account prior to making an offer. So there's reasons that you may want to consider it and reasons that you want. And then it depends on the market. In this market, I really don't think sellers have to do much of any thing when it comes to making concessions in this particular market, because there's just so much demand. But if it were a slower or tougher market, then a seller may want to consider some concessions to drum up that buyer's interest and or have them to bring their offer. So it depends on the market. I don't think it's necessary in this one.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Anything else about those topics so far? All right. Well, then I will open the floor to you all. Do you all have any challenges or questions about a transaction that you have going, or something that you've heard about or run into lately?
I do have a question, and I know that there's a lot more experienced agents on here, and I'm just looking for just the thought of it. So I have had a client who has put in numerous offers. We've seen numerous showings. She's put in numerous offers. We've gone through some inspections. Some things haven't worked out, whatever. But she has found, I guess, as she continues to look, that the properties that she has put offers on have accepted offers less than what she has offered. And so she's just trying to, to determine, and I know I spoke to others, but I just want to get more opinions on this one where, what are the causes of that? How do you keep them from being discouraged that, hey, you know what, I'm putting a good offer in, I'm doing a good due diligence. Why is it that we know about the cash offers being able to close faster? And a few of the times I've contacted the agents and asked them, and some of them have been really open with me, but it's still discouraging. Mm-hmm. So how do you keep them from not getting discouraged and knowing, just keep going, it's gonna happen eventually?
All right, Ruth, thank you so much for that question. And you're right, we do have some seasoned and experienced agents. What do you guys, how are y'all dealing with frustrated buyers or buyers that are getting not even outbid? In this case, they're the highest offer, but still not being selected. What do you suggest, or what are y'all doing?
Well, in one case, we are encouraging them to look at a lesser price point so that they're not at the top of their range and have no room to put bigger cash down or go in with an appraisal addendum. So sometimes it's just, having them, giving them a reality check that, this is just going to keep happening if you're not able to compete with other buyers.
Okay.
But I don't find that they're competing. Their offer have been $15,000, $20,000 more than the asking, and they've just taken a lesser offer. And so that's the question. It's not the fact that you encourage them to do as best as they can and give a good due diligence, because they look at things like that. So they're doing what we feel are the best things. But what if they are given a good offer and they're still not getting?
So, I mean, it's almost expected now that you have an appraisal addendum that covers any size gap, and that you have an as-is addendum that just clearly states we're not going to be asking for anything, and you meet their dates that they want, whatever their desired closing date, and you give them free rent during the seller possession. I mean, sellers ask for it all, and it looks like they get it
in this
very
market.
often.
Yeah.
In this market. Although I just went through a negotiation last night where two buyers got really fed up and just felt like this is too much for them. And even though they were in negotiations, they just felt like they were just being dictated to too much. And I think it was something to do with how their buyer's agent handled things too. But it was really odd because one buyer after another, they bid so high just to get in the game. And then when they were in the running, they realized that, wait a minute, I don't think I want this house for this much money or these terms that I'm being asked to agree to. And they backed out. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. And, they really do have to make sure that they want it that badly, because they're going to be raked over the coals and pretty much spread very thin. In this case, a lot of buyers are giving up their future equity for several years just to get into the home right now. So they do have to be confident that this is the one for them. Yeah.
Ruth, I would
Go
like,
ahead, Tammy.
sorry about that. I have a buyer. He's also an investor, and he does really good with his due diligence. He does really great with his offers, and we just kept losing. And I kept sharing with him that he may even have to be better than what he was doing, because he started out real good. We won one or two, and then it was like that gap to where things just kept increasing, and then we started losing again. So what I started doing with him is, once the homes that he was interested in or put offers in, when they close, I was sending him the information on the terms of how it closed, as well as what the price was. And of course, sometimes even though they offer something, it's not going to always close at that. But if they have that price addendum, of course, that kind of covers it. But I think that helped open his eyes a little bit, to where he had to learn to stretch himself a little bit more. And once he done that, we started winning a couple of offers with him. So, but I do try to encourage in the beginning. I try to encourage them not to get discouraged. Now, I've got buyers that, we are exhausted with working with, because we've had to put in so many offers too. We all deal with that, I think. But I do try to encourage them in the beginning, what's the possibility of happening with them having to put numerous offers in, to not let it discourage them. And that communication, I hope, helps them in the beginning with that, because it's kind of like prepping them a little bit. But hopefully, but I did find that sending him that information just made a world of difference in him seeing with his own eyes, what the competition we were up against out there was. And it helped that scenario a lot.
Yeah. And it could be too, Ruth, that what you're used to for due diligence and the price of the homes is just significantly different in this market. So I know that there are some agents that are able to kind of share something with you as far as where you even close or something to that effect. In the chat, we have a couple of thoughts and ideas too. Sarah shared that they have played around with loan types to see if that could make a difference. But again, when you're competing against cash, it may or may not make a difference, but there are some loan types. And I think that our lender, Union Mortgage, provides a type of loan that is similar to cash that you could learn about. The bridge loan products and things like that potentially might be an option, so that they could compete with cash offers. She also mentioned that the close price is not necessarily the price that they went under contract with. If there were some negotiations or things that might have changed the price. So it could be that they might have started higher and had to negotiate potentially down as far as explanations for why it could not have gone through. Mary says it could have been a higher DD. We have seen due diligence, Ruth, here lately in the up to $100,000 due diligence range. I don't know what price point you're talking about here, but I have heard of people paying six-figure due diligence in this market. And so it is astounding, some of the numbers that we're seeing come across just for them to win the bids. Okay. And then I also see, Sarah shared the first-time home buyer financing program from State Employees Credit Union. That's a really great program. But again, when it comes to a program like that, your client would still need to have a significant amount of DD to be able to attract that seller and to win that bid. Okay, so yeah, this is the kind of market where you're going to have to dig deep, and you are going to have to find ways to keep yourself encouraged, because this is hard for you as an agent, let alone trying to encourage your client. And so find ways to find hope, put a rainbow on your wall to look at sometimes when it's feeling a little dreary. But find ways to encourage yourself so that you can stay encouraged for your clients as well. This is a tough market, and you guys have to sometimes encourage yourself when you're up against these kinds of challenges, and for buyers, it's just really difficult. All right. So any other thoughts or any other encouragement for Ruth while we wait and prepare to keep going and get that buyer his or her home?
I have one thing, Tiffany, it's
Okay.
Cindy.
Hey.
Ruth, you can also reach out to the agents and ask them where or who the agents are. Are they from I'm sure you're in Hillsborough and Durham, but I know that when people are making offers on my listings in Alamance County, they can ask me, like, where are the offers coming from? And I can say, we have an offer from a Triangle agent or from a Greensboro agent. Well, the Greensboro agents don't know how to write offers like a Triangle agent does. And it depends on also the listing agent and how much experience they have as well. Some agents will say, hey, this is a great offer, go ahead and take it. And it might only be 3 or 4 offers. It might be the first day versus waiting 3 or 4 days. So, and it's not uncommon to have I very rarely see, and I don't work with that many buyers, maybe 1 or 2, but mostly listings, you're going to get 10, 25. Our average is about 20 or 25,000 in due diligence now. You don't see the days of, 5,000 or 3,000. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what the price, it's everything, right? As Judy said about the appraisal addendum, the as-is addendums, because there's so many buyers now in a certain price range. So that's just me. It's just hard. You have to just give it to them at the very beginning. This is a tough market, but we're going to work on it and make sure they have enough money, really, at the very beginning.
That's right. Thank you, Cindy. And so again, setting those buyer expectations, again, cash is king in this market. And even if they're not paying cash for the home, putting a lot of cash into their offer in due diligence is going to be just a necessity in this market. And so having that expectation and making sure that your buyers are prepared that this is one of those fighting kind of markets. And I noticed Mary shared a chat that her daughter put in $50,000 in due diligence and still did not get the house. And so again, we're seeing due diligence numbers go even into 6 figures sometimes. I see a note here from Carrie. She said she's not sure if it's being mentioned, but they are selling FSBOs direct, representing the buyer only. They actually had one of their buyers who agreed to pay their commission, and they've had 6 of those transactions. So there's a thought, have your buyer pay your commission and go to a FSBO who doesn't have, a ton of offers maybe pouring in like a listed home. And so 6 of those transactions, that's pretty significant in this particular market. Yep. Good idea. Thank you, Tara, for saying that. That is a great idea. And thank you for sharing that with us, Carrie. Judy, did I see your hand?
Yes. So on the matter of these big fat due diligence checks, I'm wondering from others, are you requiring those checks to come as a bank check versus a personal check? I've been used to getting bank check, requiring and asking for bank checks and getting them. I had one agent yesterday who gave me some pushback saying, what's wrong with a personal check? The funds will be immediately available. And I said, well, really? Usually that's not the case. So I'm wondering what others are finding with that.
Anybody have any feedback there? What kind of checks are you asking for or getting?
If it's over.
We haven't had any limitations on ours. But I always ask the seller what they want if they have a preference, but they don't usually care.
Okay. Pete, what were you saying?
If it's over $5,000 or out of town, I ask for a cashier's check.
Okay, so a certain amount you're asking for, a cashier's or a bank check. I
You
have
can
had,
also do it Venmo.
yeah, that's what I was just about to say. Recently, we're having a lot more electronic transfers now. And so some sellers are, you know, savvy and just want the immediate transfer from some sort of a cash app or a Venmo or electronic transfer. And if that's the case, if your sellers are accepting funds that way, you just have to make sure that you request proof of that transfer electronically for your records, because you still have to upload something in your documentation, in your command, if that transfer takes place electronically. But yeah, so Sarah said the right thing though. It's up to your seller how they want to receive the compensation. If they're open to cashier's checks, personal checks, electronic transfers, and then you follow their lawful instructions.
Yeah. There are limits on Venmo and Zelle though. So if you're dealing with $50,000, my understanding is that you can't do that much at once anyway.
Mhm.
I am interested if they want to wire. I know we can't be
Wire.
involved in wiring.
Right.
How would that work though? If buyer and seller both said, yeah, we'll do a wire.
Okay, so they,
Not supposed to get involved. So how do you do that?
okay, if that's the case, once buyer and seller, if they're agreeing and they have come under contract and they want to transfer by wire, they would have to be provided one another's contact information to handle the wire themselves. And then you would have to ask for some sort of proof that the wire has taken place. So you'd have to ask your client for proof, if you're the buyer or the seller's agent, proof of confirmation that the wire took place.
So
But yeah,
basically,
you can't provide the wire instructions. Make sure you stay out of that part.
So they speak directly to one another then, right?
Specifically regarding wire instructions only.
Okay.
So make sure that that's clear.
So the seller then has to talk to the buyer and say, buyer, this is my bank, this is my routing number, this is my account number, go for it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And you, again, make sure that you're very clear. You have to educate your buyers and sellers. Make sure that the only thing that they can talk about are the specific wire instructions, because you cannot be involved in that. Mm-hmm. Any other discussions need to take place through the agents. There's no negotiating happening. There's no chit chat or any such thing. It's specifically wire instructions only. So you have to be very clear and educate your clients on that when it comes to if it needs to happen in that manner. Okay.
But you're not in the conversation with them though, are you? I mean, if this is a direct conversation with the two of them, you're not part of that, right?
So you're not able to facilitate the instructions or provide them from one to the other, but I don't see a problem with you attending the conversation if that would help you allow to regulate and make sure it's only between wire instructions and no other attempts at negotiations or such.
There are things you can do that are a bad idea, and that's one of them.
Which is what? Which is have them talk? What's the bad idea? Just having them talk directly?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so again, it can be done specifically for the wire instructions. So a good idea would be to monitor that if you must, but remember, you cannot provide them. And so it's, you know, how are you going to follow your client's lawful instructions and meet their needs with getting these large due diligence transfers? Because it makes sense, you know, they would want to transfer electronically in some cases. You may have to wait a while if there are cashier's checks or such involved. I've got a couple of comments in the chat here. Mary saying that wiring is scary. She had a buyer who was given the wrong account number And again, that's why we can't be involved with providing this information on behalf of any clients. Carrie says that they are asking for bank checks also because they don't want to hand over personal checks with their account numbers and their routing numbers and all that. So it could be for protection of your client that it would be a better idea to use the bank checks anyway. Luckily, it was resolved because it wasn't a real account. Oh, good, Mary, that's a good thing because it could have gone to someone's account and they're not sending it back. So that worked out well in that case. But again, make sure that you guys are crystal clear that you cannot be involved in providing any kind of wiring instructions. All right. All right. Any other questions? Any other challenges? Thoughts, ideas? All right. Well, I just wanted to thank you all for attending. Glad you asked today. Again, if you did not receive an invitation to the commercial training, make sure that you email April. The email address is at the top of the chat, frontdesk.hb.kw@gmail.com. So if you're interested in attending that commercial training and you did not get the invite today, email her your correct email address so that we can get that invitation out to you. Those invitations did go out. And again, the reminders, make sure that you submit your documentation. You can't just upload it in Command. You actually have to hit the submit button within 48 hours of anything that's been executed and get those privilege licenses and those annual renewals into the Market Center so that we can continue to pay you when you are working. Sarah.
What do you mean when you say get it into the Market Center? Do I need to bring it here?
Okay,
Or
so
send
for
it?
so the policy is for the privilege license, we just need proof of payment sent to the big email. So proof that you've paid your annual privilege license, email it to brokerincharge832@gmail.com. And then if you have an entity, we need proof of your annual firm license renewal and proof of the payment that you filed your annual report to the Secretary of State. So we need both of those if you're operating in an entity and receiving payment through that entity. And so all of those documentation that you have needs to be emailed to brokerincharge832@gmail.com. Yeah, thank you for asking for clarification. Any other questions? All right, well, if not, I'm going to give you all your 12 minutes back. Thanks again for joining us, and I am so glad you asked. We'll see you next time in 2 weeks. Have a great one. Thanks, everybody. Bye. You're welcome.